A temple older than farming shouldn't exist, yet it stands on a hill in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe. The site is nearly 12,000 years old, built long before villages, crops, or domesticated animals. And that single fact breaks the timeline we've trusted for decades. Massive stone pillars arranged in circles, carved with foxes, vultures, boars, and symbols we still can't decode. Each pillar weighs tons, shaped and moved by people who were supposed to be small, mobile, hunter-gatherer groups. So the real question isn't, how did they build it? The question is, why did the world's first monument appear before the world's first farm? If Göbekli Tepe really came first, then ritual may have created settlement life, not the other way around. And that would mean our idea of how civilization began is based on the wrong sequence. Let's look at the evidence. Welcome back to Hidden Faith. It's great to have you here. If you've followed this channel for a while, you know we focus on clear evidence and straightforward explanations, especially when a discovery forces us to rethink long-accepted ideas. Göbekli Tepe is one of those discoveries. It doesn't just adjust a timeline, it challenges the entire order of events that shaped early human history. Today, we're going step by step through what archaeologists found, why the dating changed everything, and how this site raises a simple but important question. Did ritual come before farming? No drama, no speculation, just the strongest facts we have so far. Göbekli Tepe sits on a dry hill overlooking the plains of southeastern Turkey. For years, it blended into the landscape as a series of small mounds that didn't look important. Early surveys in the 1960s even listed it as a possible medieval cemetery because broken stone fragments were scattered across the surface. Nothing suggested a major prehistoric site. The turning point came in the mid-1990s when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt revisited the area. He noticed that the stones on the ground weren't gravestones, they were weathered tops of carved pillars. That simple observation changed the excavation strategy and opened one of the most significant archaeological projects of the century. As digging began, Schmidt's team uncovered circular stone enclosures filled with tall T-shaped pillars, each carved with animals and abstract symbols. The deeper they went, the clearer it became that the structures belonged to a time far older than expected. Radiocarbon samples taken from surrounding sediments, charcoal, and backfill consistently pointed to dates around 9600–8800 BCE, roughly 12,000 years before today. This placed the early phases of Göbekli Tepe at the very edge of the last ice age, long before domesticated grains, long before permanent towns, and long before the accepted timeline for organized religious spaces. The dating results didn't stand alone. Stratigraphic layers confirmed a clear sequence. Older, more monumental enclosures lay at the bottom, while smaller, simpler structures appeared in the upper layers. What made the site even more unusual was the discovery that many of the lower enclosures had been intentionally backfilled. They weren't abandoned and left to decay. They were deliberately buried with large amounts of stone debris, animal bones, and soil, as if the people who built them wanted to close the space permanently. This combination, early dates, monumental stonework, and deliberate burial, created a historical problem. According to the conventional model, sites like this should only appear after farming and settled villages emerge, because large groups would need stable food supplies and long-term organization. Yet Göbekli Tepe shows architecture on a scale that shouldn't exist in a hunter-gatherer world. The site forced researchers to revisit assumptions about how prehistoric communities organized labor, shared beliefs, and coordinated large projects. By the end of the first excavation seasons, one thing was certain. Göbekli Tepe wasn't a minor anomaly. It was a direct challenge to the story of how early societies developed, and it demanded an explanation that fit the evidence rather than the old timeline. Before Göbekli Tepe entered the conversation, archaeologists worked with a clear and predictable sequence for understanding early civilization. The model was simple and logical. Small mobile hunter-gatherer groups gradually experimented with wild grains, eventually learned to cultivate them, then settled into permanent villages. Once food production stabilized and populations grew, these communities developed social roles, leadership structures, and shared belief systems. Only then, according to the traditional timeline, would people build large ritual or ceremonial structures. Religion, in this model, was a product of stable settlement and agricultural surplus. The Natufian culture of the Levant fit this framework neatly. They lived around 12,500–9,500 BCE and are often considered a transitional group between foragers and early farmers. Archaeologists pointed to their semi-sedentary sites, early stone architecture, storage pits, and increasing reliance on wild cereals. The idea was that once groups remained in one place long enough, they naturally developed shared rituals and symbolic spaces. Even small shrines or gathering areas were thought to appear only after people had a consistent food supply and a reason to stay put. This conventional story was supported by what appeared to be a logical chain of events. Food security leads to population growth. Population growth leads to permanent settlements. Settlements create social complexity. Social complexity produces religion and ritual architecture. Göbekli Tepe disrupted this chain immediately. The site showed monumental pillars, coordinated labor, and complex symbolic art at a time when people were still fully dependent on hunting wild animals and gathering seasonal plants. There were no signs of domesticated crops or permanent houses. And yet, the structures at Göbekli Tepe far exceeded anything expected from small, mobile groups. This misalignment raised a simple but uncomfortable question. If the old sequence is correct, how could a large ritual center exist before farming began? The conventional model had no space for hunter-gatherers organizing hundreds of workers, carving multi-ton pillars and sustaining repeated construction efforts over long periods. Before Göbekli Tepe, the timeline of early civilization seemed tidy. After its discovery, the model looked backward. The site forced researchers to consider that belief systems and ritual behavior might have been the driving force behind settlement, not a consequence of it. And if that's true, the foundation of our origin story has been told in the wrong order. The deeper excavations at Göbekli Tepe moved the discussion from interesting anomaly to history rewriting evidence. The site does not offer a single surprising detail. It offers a long list of them, each challenging the standard timeline. When these details are viewed together, a clear message appears. Early hunter-gatherers were far more organized, cooperative, and symbolically driven than the traditional model allows. The strongest evidence begins with the architecture itself. The oldest enclosures, often labeled Enclosure D and Enclosure C, show circular walls built from carefully shaped limestone blocks. Inside these circles stand massive T-shaped pillars, some over 5 meters tall and weighing up to 10 tons. Each pillar was quarried from bedrock nearby, shaped with stone tools, and transported uphill to the building site. Coordinating this level of labor requires planning, communication, and a shared purpose. Hunter-gatherer groups were always assumed to be too small and loosely organized for such projects. Yet these structures prove otherwise. The pillars are not blank. Many carry detailed relief carvings of animals, foxes with sharp angular bodies, snakes wrapped across vertical surfaces, boars mid-stride, cranes, wild cattle, and especially vultures. Some pillars feature abstract symbols, including H shapes, crescents, hands, belts, and possible clothing elements. These carvings were not casual decorations. They were placed with intention and repeated across multiple enclosures, suggesting a shared symbolic system that extended across generations. The scale and variety of the artwork point to dedicated artisans within the community, another sign of specialization before agriculture. Architectural layout adds another layer of evidence. Many enclosures contain two central pillars that face one another, taller than the surrounding ring pillars. This layout appears repeatedly, indicating that the design was not random. The central pillars may have represented important beings, ancestors, or conceptual figures. The surrounding pillars could have been arranged to create a defined ritual space or gathering point. The consistent layout suggests a long-term cultural memory guiding construction over centuries. Beyond architecture and art, the site shows evidence of large gatherings. Excavations recovered tens of thousands of animal bones, especially gazelle, aurochs, and wild boar. Many were butchered in large quantities, hinting at group feasting events rather than small family meals. These gatherings would have brought together people from different bands or regions, something that strengthens social ties and maintains shared beliefs. The idea that early societies used feasting to create cooperation aligns with modern anthropological models of ritual behavior. One of the most discussed elements is the possibility of cosmology or sky alignment. A few researchers have proposed that certain enclosures align with celestial events or star patterns. These ideas remain debated, and some correlations may be coincidental. However, the repeated use of specific animal motifs, especially vultures, does match symbolic traditions found in other early cultures tied to death, transition, and cosmological beliefs. Even without firm star map evidence, the symbolic consistency shows a worldview that extended beyond the immediate environment. Another crucial layer of evidence is social organization. Coordinating pillar carving, quarrying, transport, enclosure building, food preparation, and ritual activity requires roles within the society. This doesn't imply a formal hierarchy like later kingdoms, but it does suggest leadership, planning, and cooperation across multiple groups. The fact that these activities happened repeatedly over centuries indicates long-term commitment to the site. Hunter-gatherer life was supposed to be flexible and mobile, but Göbekli Tepe required stability in planning and shared cultural priorities. Perhaps the most surprising evidence is the intentional backfilling. Many enclosures were not abandoned naturally. They were deliberately filled with stone fragments, animal bones, and debris, covering the pillars almost completely. This act took effort and organization. It suggests a ritual closure, a decision that a particular space had served its purpose and needed to be sealed. This behavior is rare in early prehistory and adds a layer of intentionality that contradicts the idea of small, simple groups drifting from place to place. When compared with other sites, the contrast becomes sharper. Çatalhöyük, often cited as an early ritual center, appears thousands of years later and within a settled farming society. Neolithic sites in Europe, like stone circles or long barrows, also come much later and rely on agricultural economies. Göbekli Tepe predates all of them. The only groups close in time are the Natufians, but even their structures do not approach the scale or symbolic complexity seen here. Taken together, the evidence points to a new model. People with shared beliefs gathered first, and stable food production followed later. The site likely functioned as a regional meeting place for seasonal rituals, feasting, and social negotiation. These gatherings may have encouraged experimentation with plant cultivation to support predictable annual events. In this sense, ritual did not emerge from settled life. Settled life may have emerged from the need to support ritual gatherings. Göbekli Tepe is not a puzzle because of one unusual detail. It is a puzzle because every category — architecture, art, labor, symbolism, social scale, and deliberate burial — points toward a version of prehistory, where belief and cooperation existed long before farming. That shift forces us to reconsider how early humans built meaning, community, and identity. The evidence suggests that what held the first large groups together wasn't crops or storage. It was shared ritual and the desire to return to the same sacred place year after year. Göbekli Tepe didn't just reshape the origin story of religion. It triggered debates across archaeology, anthropology, and even cognitive science. The site is so old and so unexpected that researchers still disagree on what the evidence actually means. These disagreements don't come from denial. They come from the reality that the site pushes the limits of what we can confidently say about people who lived 12,000 years ago. One major controversy centers on what the site actually was. Was it a temple, a feasting center, a meeting ground, or a combination of all three? Some archaeologists argue that calling it a temple is too strong because the word implies organized religion, priests, and complex hierarchies that may not have existed yet. They prefer to describe Göbekli Tepe as a regional gathering place where different groups met seasonally. Others point to the size and symbolic coherence of the pillars and say the term ritual center is appropriate. Both sides agree on one thing. Whatever Göbekli Tepe was, it wasn't a village, and it wasn't a typical campsite. Symbolism is another point of disagreement. Some researchers claim the animal carvings reflect cosmological ideas or sky patterns. Others say these interpretations risk overreaching because symbolic systems are difficult to decode without written records. The possible vulture and head motif, found on several pillars, is often linked to death rituals in other ancient cultures. But whether this represents a shared belief system or practical symbolism is still debated. Most scholars agree the carvings were meaningful, but they disagree on how far we can go in reconstructing that meaning. A third controversy relates to labor organization. Traditional models say complex construction requires agricultural surplus and centralized authority. Göbekli Tepe contradicts that. Critics of the ritual-first model argue that we may be underestimating the flexibility and capabilities of hunter-gatherer communities. They suggest that large-scale cooperation might not require farming or permanent settlements. It could arise naturally when multiple groups share social ties or gathering traditions. Others push back, noting that even highly cooperative foraging groups today rarely build anything on this scale. There is also a broader concern about speculative reconstruction. Because the site is visually impressive, it attracts theories linking it to lost civilizations or advanced ancient knowledge. Archaeologists consistently reject these claims. There is no evidence of forgotten technologies, vanished cultures with superior engineering or outside intervention. Everything at Göbekli Tepe can be explained using stone tools, coordinated labor, and the cultural imagination of early humans. The final point of disagreement involves the purpose of the deliberate burial. Some see it as ritual closure, a symbolic act marking the end of a phase or tradition. Others suggest it might have been practical, related to shifting environmental conditions or group movement patterns. The truth may involve both, but until more layers are uncovered, the debate remains open. Göbekli Tepe sits at the edge of what archaeology can explain with confidence. That uncertainty is exactly why it continues to provoke discussion. It forces experts to rethink assumptions, adjust models, and confront the possibility that the first large-scale human projects weren't driven by farming or survival, but by shared meaning and collective ritual. When researchers step back from the debates and look at the full body of evidence, a few grounded explanations begin to take shape. None of them are proven, but each offers a clear and realistic way to understand how a site like Göbekli Tepe could exist long before farming or settled life. These explanations avoid speculation and focus on what the archaeology actually supports. The first explanation is the ritual-driven settlement theory. In this model, people didn't build monuments because they lived in large, stable communities. Instead, the need for ritual gatherings brought large groups together, and this repeated cooperation eventually created the conditions for stable food production. Seasonal gatherings would have required predictable food supplies, which may have encouraged early attempts at cultivating wild plants. If people returned to Göbekli Tepe every year, the pressure to manage resources more effectively could have accelerated the shift toward agriculture. In this sense, ritual wasn't a product of farming. Farming was a response to ritual. A second explanation sees Göbekli Tepe as a pilgrimage center. The diversity of animal remains, stone types, and tool styles suggests people may have come from different regions. A shared symbolic system, repeated design choices, and centuries of continued construction point to a site that mattered across a wide area. Pilgrimage doesn't require permanent residence. It only requires meaning strong enough to motivate travel. Communities might have visited Göbekli Tepe during key seasons for ceremonies, social negotiation, or large feasts that reaffirmed alliances. A third possibility is the seasonal gathering and social cohesion model. Hunter-gatherer groups often rely on cooperation to exchange information, form partnerships, and maintain broader social networks. Göbekli Tepe may have served as a neutral meeting ground where disputes were resolved, marriages arranged, and knowledge shared. Ritual activities would strengthen identity across groups that otherwise lived separately for most of the year. In this model, the architecture is a physical anchor for social memory, a place people returned to because it structured relationships and reinforced belonging. Another explanation focuses on symbolic specialization. The presence of skilled artisans, consistent pillar shapes, and repeated motifs suggest that certain individuals or clans may have held symbolic authority. They may not have been priests, but they could have been respected ritual specialists who guided construction and ceremony. Their expertise could have shaped the site into a long-term cultural project. Across all explanations, one idea repeats: Göbekli Tepe required cooperation on a scale that earlier models did not predict for hunter-gatherers. Whether driven by ritual, alliance building, seasonal gatherings, or shared symbolism, the site represents a turning point where social meaning became strong enough to pull people together and motivate large collective projects. Göbekli Tepe may not give us a single answer, but it gives us a clear direction. Early humans organized around shared beliefs long before they organized around fields and villages. And that simple shift changes how we understand the origins of society itself. Göbekli Tepe forces us to rethink the starting point of civilization. For decades, the story ran in one direction. Farming came first, then villages, then organized belief systems. But the evidence on this hillside suggests the opposite may be true. People with shared meaning gathered here before they had crops or permanent homes. They carved pillars, held rituals, and built a space that mattered enough to return to for centuries. This flips the sequence we assumed shaped early humanity. If early groups organized themselves around ritual gatherings, then meaning, not material stability, may have been the first foundation of social life. Cooperation didn't begin because people had enough food. Instead, food stability may have developed because cooperation already existed. That perspective changes how we understand early humans. They were not simply responding to the environment. They were shaping their world through shared ideas, memories, and commitments. The intentional burial of the enclosures adds another layer. It hints at decisions made with care, signaling the end of a cultural phase or a shift in belief. This wasn't random abandonment. It was a choice that carried purpose. Yet we still don't know why the builders closed their own ritual spaces or what new practices emerged afterward. In many ways, Göbekli Tepe leaves us with a simple question. What if the sacred came before the settled? If true, then our idea of civilization's origin has been built from the wrong direction. The first major human projects may not have been about survival. They may have been about connection, the desire to gather, celebrate, and create a shared identity. And if ritual created settlements, then the earliest spark of civilization wasn't farming or technology. It was meaning. It was community. It was the human need to turn shared beliefs into lasting structures. Thanks for watching this breakdown of Göbekli Tepe. If you found this episode helpful, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation here on Hidden Faith. This channel focuses on clear evidence and straightforward explanations, and your support helps these topics reach more people who enjoy thoughtful, well-grounded history. I'd also like to hear from you. Tell me in the comments which ancient site, lost tradition, or early belief system you want us to explore next. Your ideas help shape future episodes, and many of the topics we cover start with viewer suggestions. See you in the next one.